Welcome everyone to the July 2018 Phoenix Tableau User Group. We have two items on tonight's agenda. First, we have Tableau Zen Master Steve Wexler giving us a presentation on how to visualize survey data. Then we'll round out the evening with Workout Wednesday. And with that, I will kick it over to Steve.
So some great ways to visualize survey data and virtually any type of data. Just show of hands, how many people are into or need to visualize survey data? Okay, how many people think, and you can be honest with me, how many of you think survey data is kind of boring? Okay, my hand is up too. I rarely lead at a cocktail party when I'm meeting somebody and go, well, I don't mean to show off, but I visualize survey data. In any case, I'm going to try to make it interesting for you, and I'm going to show you two techniques that I use that work for any type of data, not just survey data. So I'm definitely going to show you Tableau Prep, how to get the data in a certain format so you can do great things with it. Then I'm going to show you how to visualize some typical survey questions and show you, hey, this technique we just used, that's really cool. It works with any data. So brief background, I am the founder and principal and sole employee of Data Revelations. Was Tableau's inaugural Iron Viz champion. That was back in 1957. I am a 5-time Tableau Zen Master, and it does say Tableau Zen Master on my card. Now, realize most of you in this group probably know that that's an actual thing. You know, that Tableau will anoint a certain number of its users as a Zen master, and it's a high honor and one that I'm very proud of, and I would think that Anne is very proud of it as well, and she's certainly very well deserving. If you're not in the Tableau community, or if you've not been involved for that long, I don't know if you can hear the dog barking, but he's excited about Zen masters. You know, if you give somebody a card and it says Zen master, and they don't know that's a thing, they think you're a complete tool. Now, what person puts Zen Master on, on his own card? It is a real thing. But by far the thing I'm most proud of is being one of the 3 authors of the Big Book of Dashboards. I'd like to think I've done at least 2 really smart things in my life. Smart thing number 1 is I married my wife. Smart thing number 2 is I had the good sense not to write this book myself, but I managed to cajole and convince fellow tool and Tableau Zen Master Jeffrey Schaefer and Andy Cotgreave, who's the chief technical evangelist at Tableau, to author the book with me. And it is a way better book having the 2 of them than just me on my own. But I'm not going to be talking about the Big Book of Dashboards or what's in it or why I hope you will go to Amazon if you don't already own it to purchase it. Instead, we're going to deal with survey data. And before there's a lot of stuff that I hope will apply even if you never touch survey data. But I'm going to kind of walk through some of the stuff that how I look at this, which is, all right, someone has just said, hey, you're good at Tableau. We've got the survey stuff. We understand we could probably do some really cool stuff with this. We'd like your help because you're good at Tableau. Well, the first thing is, you didn't make the survey. You didn't design it. You didn't publish it. You probably want to know, well, what does the survey comprise? So I really like to see, what did the survey instrument look like when it was out in the wild? And how does that map to the data that's going to be dumped in your lap? So here's how a yes, no, maybe question might look like when it's out in the wild. And you might see, hey, will you vote in the upcoming election? Yes, no, don't know. And then when you get the data, whether you're connecting directly to a backend server or most likely, most of the time it's, oh, we'll give you, a CSV file, or we'll give you an SPSS file, or we'll give you an Excel file. You'll get the opportunity to either download or receive that data where everything is encoded as text responses or with no numeric responses. So what often this looks like is the top row will be the question ID. Maybe you'll have a human readable form of it in the next row, and then you'll have all the different responses as no's, yeses, and don't knows. Or the other set of data will have exactly the same thing, but you'll see numeric encoding. And if somebody says, well, which way do you want it? You want it both ways. And the goal is to then make something that maybe looks like this, where you're showing the percentage of people that say yes, no, don't know, and maybe you show the N count there as well. And obviously you're going to want to filter it by men versus women and stuff like that. So that's what is called a yes, no, a single punch question, a radio button question. You only got one choice for it. Okay. Well, what about a multi-punch question, a check all that apply question? Please indicate all the things that you measure, check all that apply. And people are going to check off what they have and don't have, or what they do and don't do. And this is the way you'd like to see it encoded, either as no's and yeses or as zeros and ones. Lots of survey tools do something that I think is evil. They code things as ones and blanks, not ones and zeros when you get the numeric responses. And that makes it hard to tell the difference between someone who didn't select an item and someone who just bailed on the question completely. But there are at least two ways that I can think of to elegantly handle that type of situation. If you're going to be dealing with survey data, I guarantee you're going to run into this. Most survey tools don't do this in the way that I would like. That includes Qualtrics and SurveyMonkey. And interestingly, though, Qualtrics used to do it right. And the Tableau Zen Master, I get to say what's right and what's wrong. It's not right. And then your goal is maybe to visualize something like this, which is the percentage of people that are doing something from highest to lowest. And here we're breaking it down by men versus women. And hey, there's a really big difference about measuring blood pressure. So let's make that a different color so people can't help but see it using the pre-attentive attribute of color. Finally, for now, I'll just show you one more thing. There's also benchmarking questions like indicate how many hours a week you spend on Makeover Monday, or how many hours did it take you to build that Iron Viz submission, or what's your salary, et cetera. That's a benchmarking question. But the other type of thing is a Likert scale question. And yes, it really is pronounced Likert, not Likert. The man's name was Rensis Likert. And he came up with this brilliant idea of applying quantitative value to qualitative concepts, which something like this, which is indicate the degree to which you agree or disagree with the following statements, and it gets coded on a 1 through 5 scale. So not at all, small degree, moderate, high degree, very high degree. And what does this data look like when you get it? Well, it looks either like this, where you've got the question IDs all at the top, and then you've got the responses, or you have the numeric responses that are over here corresponding. In this case, it's a scale of 0 through 4. More often than not, it's on a 1 through 5. And then, well, how do you actually visualize these results? This is one of my favorite ways for doing it. This is a divergent stacked bar chart, where you take 100% stacked bar and you kind of move the bars left and right to show how sentiment is skewing. All right, in a minute, I'm going to show you what the data, I'm going to look at a data set that we're going to be dealing with. And then we're going to use Tableau Prep to get it in the format that we need it to be in. This is what the data looks like when you first start with it. This is data, and it's encoded in the label format that's over here. Oh, hold on a sec. Can you see? So I've got it as labels, yeses and nos and stuff like that. And there's 1 row per respondent. Pretty much every survey data that I've ever seen, there's an ID for each respondent. Okay. If you just try to connect to the data in this format, you're going to be a very unhappy person. You're going to just find, man, this sucks. Tableau's terrible at survey data. Let's go with something else. This is a good start, where you leave the columns that you're going to use to cut the data. I call these the demographic questions, like gender, generation, location, and maybe you have a weighting variable that's in there. But then instead of having a separate row for each question, you will pivot each of the questions that you want to visualize separately. And you will have you will repeat each row as many times as there are questions. Now, that throws people off. They're going, man, that seems really redundant. Look at all this stuff that's repeated over and over again. Yes, I know this is respondent number 2, and he's a guy, and he's Generation X, and he lives in South America. Why do I need to repeat that? Well, it means that if you ever just want to focus on one question, you know exactly everything about that respondent. Well, this is getting there. This is what we want to have. If you can get your data this way, man, can you fly with Tableau? Which is, you've got your demographic data, you've got your question ID, and then you want to have both the data as numbers and the data as labels. And if you're wondering, well, why would you want both? Well, sometimes you just want to know what's the percentage of people that chose either that there's a really common thing in survey data, percent top 2 boxes. You give somebody 5 choices, and you just want to know the percentage of people who are very satisfied or satisfied, or say it's very important or important. So you just choose everyone that chose a 4 or 5. Well, some questions a 4 refers to important. Some questions it refers to satisfied. Some times it refers to agree. How are you going to know what that is? You're going to write this ridiculous case statement that says if it's this question, it means this. So having both of these things together. The other thing is you're not going to have, know what Q2_5 means. Hold on a sec. Let me zoom. I think that's so you can see that a little larger. What the heck is Q2_5_6 mean? Well, I like to have this little metadata here, which says, oh, that question, it's part of another group of questions. I've got this question grouping over here. And just highlight that. And then here's the human readable form of this thing. So let me show you what we've got and what we want to have. So here is the data as you might download it from your favorite survey tool. I've got respondent ID, and then conveniently I have all the demographic questions in the front. Maybe they may be scattered throughout. Most surveys I see, people get fatigued filling out surveys, so you want to make sure you know who the people are. Those are usually the first questions you ask. Then these are a whole bunch of check all that apply questions. Then I've got this Likert scale questions here, and it goes pretty wide. Okay? That's the data as I might have downloaded it as labels. Here's exactly the same data, but encoded as numbers, with the exception of question Q100, which is what is your salary? That's also, there's not going to be labels for that. Sometimes you ask people to type in a number. So here it says no's and yeses, or very high degree and high degree. Here it says 0s and 1s and 5s and 4s. Then, so you're going to get the data this way from most survey tools. You can get it as labels, you can get it as numbers. You probably don't get this thing, which is something that maps the thing. You may be able to get close to it, but you may have to build this type of thing by hand, where, hey, here's the question ID, here's the human readable form of it. Gee, let me group these 9 questions together because I'm probably going to want to visualize them at the same time. And maybe I'll say, hey, this is a multi-punch question. So you'll see here that, and on Q type, meaning question type, maybe I want some way to look at all the Likert questions that I've put together. So what we want to do is get this, and turn it into this. Now, hold on, let me go back for 1 second to this. And I want you to see how many rows we have. There are 846 rows. The first row is just the column header, so I have 845 responses. When I reshape this data, where I'm repeating each respondent for every single question that was asked, I end up with 24,932 rows. And that's totally cool. You don't want to have super wide data when you're visualizing survey data. You want to have tall data. So the question is, how do we start with that other thing? Ooh, you want to really mess yourself up? Have Snagit open when you're working with Tableau, and then you try to drop pills and you can't, and it's because Snagit is in the way. How many of you have run into that problem before? Oh, okay, now three, trust me, you will. Snagit's in the wrong place. You try to drag a pill in, and it's not working. In any case, how are we going to get that thing that had a lot of columns and not that many rows and turn it into something that has only a handful of columns and a whole lot of rows? And there are a variety of different tools that we can use for this. Okay. And at some point or other, I've written about all of these things. The Tableau Excel add-in, 9.x's pivot feature, Tableau's ability to pivot and do cross-database joins. No reason to use any of those. Here are 5 other techniques that you can use. I'm a big fan of Alteryx and EasyMorph. My problem with Alteryx is it's this incredible ETL tool. It's a geospatial analysis. It's a predictive modeling tool. It's a paring knife. It's a machete. It's a flamethrower, and it's a bazooka. You're spending a lot of money when you only need one thing. EasyMorph kicks ass. It's great. There's a free version of the tool, and it may handle a lot of the stuff that you want to do without you ever having to pay for it. But the one I want to talk about today is Tableau Prep, which is also free with a subscription. And I think, if you don't have a subscription, I think it's free for a couple of years. So let me tell you how in Tableau Prep to get the data in the format that we want to get it in. And then we'll do some visualization. So let me start up Tableau Prep. Had I been prepared, we could have saved the 10 or 12 seconds it will take to load. But I forgot to have it preloaded. Sorry about that. How many of you have looked at Tableau Prep? How many of you have seen a demo of it at some point? Okay. How many of you have had Tableau Prep? Never heard of it. Okay. Tableau, recognizing that the number one impediment to success with Tableau is getting your data in a format so you can do great things with it, has been arduously working on a data preparation tool where you can take the data and get it in the format that you need so you can do great things with it. And in late April of this year, they released it to the world. And I'm very pleased because, man, it just kicks ass at dealing with survey data. So here is Tableau Prep. And one thing it has in common with Tableau, upper left-hand corner, there are things that you can click that will connect to data. So I'm going to click Connect to Data, or I can connect connections over here. And I want to connect to, look at all these different servers I can connect to, and then look at these file sources. I'm going to connect to that Excel file that I showed you just a moment ago. And let me go to Phoenix Tug. And let's go to this survey data that I just looked at with you. Now, I've got the data in there are 3 tabs in the file. My data is labels. In a totally separate file, I might have had my data as numbers, and a totally separate file, I might have had the question helper. In this case, I've got all 3 in just one file in 3 separate tabs. So I'm going to bring the data labels in, and I'm going to start by saying, what are the ways that I think I may want to cut the data by? I can always change this. But I'm going to indicate, well, I definitely need everybody's respondent ID, and I'm probably going to want to filter or look at the data by gender, by location, by generation, and someone may have done some preparation where you will weigh survey responses so that if the people that you polled are not an accurate reflection of your population, you may decide to weigh certain people's responses more heavily. So these are the file fields that I want. I don't need these other things right now. This is going to be my demographics. So I've indicated I want to bring the data in as labels, and this plus sign where I say I want to add a step, it allows me to inspect the data. And holy crap, I was expecting to see this thing that's down at the bottom, which is just kind of this tabular view of the data. But look at this thing up at the top. It's actually giving me a profile view. Without even making a visualization, I have a really good idea of who took this survey. You know, that there are more men than women. There are, 3 people who didn't bother to say where they live. Very few of whom live in the Antarctica, but the largest number of which live in North America. I've got more baby boomers and Generation X than millennials and traditionalists, and here's how the things are weighed. And over here, I've got the respondent IDs. It doesn't know that it thinks, hey, maybe you want to group them together intelligently. I'll put them in detail view. And if I'm really curious to know about respondent number 17, I can click there and see that. If I'm really curious to see everyone who's male or female. So without doing anything, I've already got a pretty good sense of my data and what I've got going on. This is pretty kick-ass, and I don't know other tools that do that. You know what? I'm going to rename this step. I'm going to call it my demographics. And if it turns out I really want to have some other question that I want to filter by, I can, simply add it, and it will become a demographic as well. All right. Now, let me bring in that same data set again. Let me just scoot this down a little bit. My data is labels. And I don't need gender, location, generation, and weight. I got them up here. What I do need to do is take all that super wide data and make it tall. And I'm going to do that by adding a pivot. This is a weird thing. Pretty much every other tool calls this an unpivot. Taking something that's wide and making it tall, Tableau calls it a pivot. Every other tool calls it an unpivot. I guess this is from the same people who tell you, oh, don't show header to remove the footer that's at the bottom of your chart. So in any case, I want to add a pivot, and I'm going to take all these things in, except my respondent ID. I need that to be by itself. And what do I want to call these? I'm taking, 36 columns and making it into 2 columns. And I want to call this first column my question ID. And I want to call this second column my labels. And if I want to just see what this looks like, I'll add a step here, and I can see that I've got my respondent ID, and I'm just moving these things around. And for question number 1, respondent number 2 said no. Respondent number 4 said no. But I've actually got the respondent listed many, many, many times. And in fact, you can see that I went from, if you look at the number of rows here, I've got 33,800. All right, what I need to do is now marry those demographics with my data as labels over here. And I'm just going to drag this and say I want to join these things together. And Tableau is going to see, hey, you got respondent ID in one place, respondent ID in another place. My guess is you'd like to map these things together. And in fact, I would, and just to see what does it look like when I'm done. Well, this is odd. I've kind of got the 2 respondent IDs, one from one data source and one from the other. I don't need this one, so I'll just remove the field. And I've got the respondent ID, the question ID, the responses as labels, and I've got my gender information, my location information. By the way, this moving the stuff around, that just makes me feel good. Tableau couldn't care less. And then I've got my results. So if I want to say, hey, what did respondent number 5, how did that person respond? I can see, oh, for this particular question ID, Q2 underscore 1, they said no. Here they said yes. Okay, so we're maybe 2/3 of the way done. Let me bring my data in as numbers. And I'm going to do the same thing. Again, I don't need gender. I don't need location, generation, and weight because I've already got them over here. Let me add a pivot. I'm going to do exactly the same thing that I did, which is I need to leave respondent ID as a separate column because that's how I merge all these things together, the common ID, so that for respondent number 2, I know everything about what they answered. Again, this is going to be, rename this field as question ID. Hopefully I spelt that. By the way, Tableau Prep is really smart. It would have guessed even though I didn't spell it right. And I'm going to rename this field my values. And I can reorder these things if you so feel so fit. And well, I've got my data numbers reshaped. I've got my data labels with my demographics. I now need to get all these things to line up together so that for respondent number 117, for question ID Q2 underscore 1, he said yes, and that should be a 1. Or he said strongly agree, and that should be a 5. So I need to get this lovely reshaped data married or merged to this reshaped data over here. So I'm going to join these things together, and Tableau is going to see respondent ID and respondent ID, and it's not going to realize, whoa, I need to make sure not just that for respondent 5 everything lines up, but for question 32 underscore A everything lines up. Because right now it's giving me, I started with 845 rows, it's giving me over 1 million rows. So I need to add another join clause. So I'm going to hit it. It guessed, hey, you probably want to match respondent ID to respondent ID. Yes, thank you. But I also want to map question ID to question ID. And now we're going to be down to 33,800 rows, which puts me in a very good mood because I've done this demo before, and that's exactly what I should have at this point. All right. So if I want to look at the data, by the way, this adding a step to see it, that's just, for me to see what's going on, and it puts me in a good mood. Gee, I don't need this respondent ID because I've already got it over here, and I've got question ID here and question ID here. I don't need 2 copies of exactly the same data when everything matches perfectly because we did an inner join. So everything in one data source matched with everything in the other, which more often than not is what happens with survey data. So I can remove this field, and yeah, I can move these things around a little bit just so that it makes it easier for me to inspect the data. And instead of aggregating or summarizing this data, I'll do it in detail view. And you can see that, here are all the questions that got a 5 response and a 4 response, etc. So this is great. The only thing is I have no idea what Q2 underscore 1 means. And I don't want to, in Tableau, be right-clicking all these things and aliasing them ad nauseum. So let me bring the question helper in that says, oh, Q2 underscore 1, here's the human readable form. It's part of this question group. And by the way, it's a multi-punch or multi-select question. So let me bring the question helper in. Where'd it go? There it is. And I'm going to join it to this data that's over here. And notice the question helper used the field questionid versus question ID, but Tableau kind of guessed what was going on. So, man, it got this exactly right. I can add a step to see what the data looks like. And the cool part of this now is as I scroll to the right, looking for my scroll arrows. Oh, this has gotten just a little too big. There we go. By the way, this control minus, you can make everything smaller, or control plus, you can make it larger. If I look at the data that's here, I can see, hey, question Q29 S8 SAT. I can see here, this is the question ID, and is part of the satisfaction question. It's a Likert question, and it's how satisfied are you with response time? And I can see that the value 1 over here corresponds to the label not at all satisfied. If you want to have those two things next to each other, that's fine. So holy crap, I've gotten my data in exactly the right format. And so maybe 1 or 2 more steps to do on this thing. One thing I just want to alert you to again, so that you're not surprised about it, which is the data that I'm presenting here, the check all apply questions, these were coded properly, what I consider properly. Let me show you what this stuff looks like when it is not coded properly. You get these gaps that are here, and it's hard to distinguish between someone who just didn't answer the question at all versus someone who left something blank. Same with this. And because you want to get the percentage of people that chose something, so you need to know how many people actually participated versus how many people just didn't participate. And I will point you to, there's a super elegant way to, in Tableau Prep, get zeros in the places where there should be zeros. I've got a step-by-step instructions, a blog post on how to do it. It's a little heavy lunch or heavy dinner for us right now, so I'm not going to be dealing with that. All right, last step with Tableau Prep. I brought in my data as labels, as numbers. I brought in my question helper. I've got my everything set up just the way that I want. What I may want to do is, because my data was set up correctly, and I don't have to worry about the check all that apply questions, I may decide, you know what? If somebody didn't answer a question, meaning they had a null for the values or a null for the labels, I can just exclude them. Now, throughout these things, you're going to see, hey, I actually did something during this clean step. You see over here it says changes to? If I expand that, I remove the redundant respondent ID and question ID field. And if I looked over here, I said exclude the nulls. If I want to see exactly what that looks like, oh my God, it looks just like the calculation editor in Tableau. And I've got all these different fields, because you can actually create your own calculations in this. This one kind of makes me laugh. I don't know the degree to which you can see this. I'm trying to, but they seem to be a little overzealous on the number of parentheses that are here. But it's saying, hey, I just want to see the things that aren't null. In any case, that took us from 33,800 rows to, you see exactly what I have here, 24,931. So I've only got one more step, which is, let me output this data. Let me create a hyperfile out of this, a Tableau extract. So let me browse to where I'd like to put it. And I'm going to put it in, we'll put it in the Phoenix Tableau user group, and we call it Ann Jackson Rocks.hyper. Oops, sorry. And so that's the file that I'm going to create. I just need to run the flow, which I can do here or up here. Okay, I'm done. I've now gotten my data exactly the way I need it to be so I can do some really kick-ass stuff in Tableau. So I'm going to shift gears and I'm going to go into Tableau and we're going to visualize some survey data. So let me do a new file. And let me connect to some data. And in a minute, I'm going to get into the, hey, that's useful even though I'm not doing survey data stuff. By the way, I could have output to a TDE file or I could have output to a CSV file. Let me connect to, man, it drives me nuts that on here I have to click more. But let me go spelunking for that file. And there's the hyperfile that we just created. And I'm going to connect live. I don't need to make an extract of the extract. And let's see what we've got here. Oop, I had the question ID, redundant question IDs. But just to show you what I would normally be doing is something like this. I would say, well, let me count the distinct number of respondents that I have. And that's a beautiful thing. There are 845 of them. Why am I saying count distinct? Because each respondent is listed like 40 times. And if I were just to say number of records, it would give me a huge number. And maybe I want to break this down by gender. By the way, the way I'm making these charts narrower is I'm using this way cool shortcut key, Control left arrow and Control right arrow, that has saved my behind a number of times. I'm proud to say there are something like 200 shortcut keys in Tableau, and I think I know 4 of them. Control up arrow, Control down arrow. In any case, this is what in my survey data classes, I go through building a demographics dashboard, etc. I just don't have the time to do that. But that's usually the first thing I do. Although I gotta tell you, not as important, except it's important to my stakeholders who will want to triangulate and see who took the survey. Are there enough people in a certain category that took the survey? I already know what my demographics look like. I saw that in Tableau Prep. In any case, what I want to do is visualize a check all that apply question. Hey, what do you measure? Check all that apply. Now, in the past, before I realized how cool it was to have that question helper stuff, I would jack question ID in the filter, and then I'd look at all these different question IDs and think, crud. Oh yeah, I think these are the ones I want to visualize. So let me, check them off. And then I'd put the question ID in here. And then I'd have to go, well, what the heck is Q2_1? And I'd right click and I'd edit the alias. I don't have to do any of that stuff. I can put question grouping in. And I'll say, oh, I just want to look at the what do you measure question. And then I can put wording in because I've already mapped. That was what the helper file was. So if you're wondering, because I've indicated that Q2_1, it's already in the Excel file, it's already in my data. I'm not having to alias any of this stuff. Well, what I want to know is the percentage of people that check this thing, this thing, this thing, this thing, or this thing. Well, you may recall that I got rid of all the rows where someone totally bailed on the question, and someone either answered with a 1 or a 0. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add up all the ones and then divide by the number of people that actually responded to this. So I've got my ones and values over here. So I'm going to say create a calculated field, and I'm going to call it check all that apply percentage. And it will be add up all the values and divide by So if you're wondering, why does this work? It kind of goes through everything iteratively, and it looks at respondent number 1 and goes, hey, you, did you check this thing? You did? Okay, that's a 1. You over there, did you check this thing? You didn't? That's a 0. 1 plus 0 is 1. Hey, you over there, did you check? You did? Yeah, you did. Okay, 1 plus 0 plus 1 is 2, divided by everybody who answered this. By the way, I don't know if you know this, but number of records is exactly the same as sum of 1. Just adds up for each row in there. But we'll just leave that as that. And for those of you who are anal compulsive and just can't, or OCD, and can't stand the idea of some being uppercase in one place and lowercase in another, I will not torture you. So this is how we're going to get the percentage of people that check all that apply. Right? Let's just drag this onto columns, sort this in descending order, make the chart narrower using our way cool control left arrow, make it taller using our way cool control up arrow, and turn on labels and go, oh, well, that looks really stupid. Let me just right click on the check all that apply, change its default properties to number format, percentage, and you better have a really good reason for giving me 2 decimal places of precision. Okay, especially since there's probably confidence intervals. I'm going to get into that. You don't need 2 decimal places of precision. And we've got a really nice check all that apply question here. Well, invariably, people are going to want to know, well, is there a difference between what men and women think? Are there a difference between different generations, you know, older and younger people? So I could put gender over here and do this. And in fact, you know, there's a pretty good story. It's hard to see right now because it's whoa, how do I parse this? But if I do this, you can go, oh, wow, look at that. There's a pretty big difference. Otherwise, men and women are pretty similar. Well, if I do this by generation, what happens? And man, this becomes a hard way to visualize. You know, I'm having a hard time taking this thing in. There's some good stories in here, but while this was super simple, the moment I say, hey, I want to see this thing broken down by a whole lot of things, I'm having trouble. And that's why I want to show you a cool way to show rank and magnitude at the same time. Here's what I'm going to want to, I'm going to demonstrate how to build. And by the way, this is available from bigbookofdashboards.com. This is one of the dashboards that's featured in the book, which is how do I show rank and magnitude at the same time? So here I'm looking at blood pressure, let's say, and it's ranked 3rd, and 60% of people checked it off. If I click it, I see some really interesting things. Yeah, it may be 3rd overall, but it's ranked 5th amongst the traditionalists, 3rd baby boomers, 3rd in Generation X, and 4th amongst millennials. And if I look at breathing, wow, big differences here. So the thing is, it's very hard to show every single option broken down by every single demographic at the same time. But if I show the overall and then do the breakdown and then say, hey, I want to inspect that, boy, you really see not just what the ranking is, but also how big or small it is. And let me show you where the technique applies and why I like it so much. So here is some modified Superstore sales data. And I see the GE profile refrigerator is number 1. If I decide to click that, I can see, well, it's 1 in consumer, but it's 9 over here, and it's 1st in home office and 2nd here, and here's how it compares in these other areas. And note that differs from this. I'll often see people create a bump chart. Hey, it's in 2nd place here, it's in 9th place here, it's in 1st place here, it's in 2nd place here. But the problem with that is it's in 2nd place. Is it just behind by a narrow thread? Or is, you know, did it lose by a ton? And, you know, that's why I kind of pushed and said, we got to have this in here. You know, so I can see, oh, you know, it's pretty far behind. And this one is only slightly ahead of number 2 over here. So how do we make something like this? So I'm going to show you this around survey data, but it works great around any data. And let me walk you through it. And I've got step-by-step instructions on how to do it. So let me do this. Let me create a ranking. I'm going to create a new calculated field called rank. And it will just do the rank. And I'm going to use rank unique, which is going to force, if two things are tied, it's going to separate them. So even though they're both at 72% or something, it's going to go in data source order and say, well, you came in third, you tied, but I'm going to put you in fourth. So rank unique. Let me drag rank onto rows. I'm going to get something that looks really stupid because I'm dragging a green pill. I'm dragging a measure. By default, Tableau wants to aggregate it when it considers it an aggregation, and it wants to draw an axis that goes from low to high along here. And just because it began life as something that's continuous with an axis that goes from a low number to a high number, doesn't have to stay that way. I can right click here and I can say make this discrete, and maybe I'll move it here and put it first. Okay, so now I've got my overall ranking. And let me duplicate this sheet. And now I want to get a breakdown by generation. So I'm going to put generation over here. And there we go. Sorry, I wanted to put wording over there. And if you're wondering, oh, hey, what's going on with this thing? Why is this thing? Oh, I know what I meant to do. Sorry. It's like this. There we go. So I want to break it down by generation. And if you're wondering, well, what's happening here? Why do I have adrenaline production and breathing? Well, it's rated first for baby boomers, Generation X, and millennials, but breathing is rated first amongst traditionalists. So, and if you look at fourth, and it's, oh my goodness, this thing is a mess. So how are we going to get this thing so that I can click on one of the things in overall, and then it will show me the rating here? And this is a case where the recipe is a little odd to get this. So that I would say the first 10 times I did this, I would have to look at my own instructions for how to do it. Eventually, you know, think about it. You're making a complex recipe. You make it enough, you don't have to look in the cookbook. So I'm going to take wording and I'm going to put it on detail. And I'm going to get something that looks really stupid. And this is where usually people bail and they hit the back button and go, oh, well, that didn't work. Well, I'm going to change the compute using here. So it is computing this by wording. By the way, the compute using, if you're confused by that, welcome to the club. The way to read this is rank this by the wording being adrenaline production, pulse rate, this, that, or the other. And I'm saying rank this by specific dimensions. The fact that generation is not checked means do it for baby boomers. And when you're done with baby boomers and you get to the next, start over again. That's how to understand the compute using dialog box. All right, if we look at this thing right now, if I put wording on label, I'll see, dang, this is working. Look, blood pressure is third here, but blood pressure is, let's see where it is. I'm ranking third. You can see breathing is third here and metabolism is third over here. So this is actually working pretty nicely. I'm going to do something with what I want to do is make it so that these things marry together. So that I click something here and then it will highlight where it is in here. So let me quickly create a new dashboard. It's not going to be the most beautiful thing you've ever seen. but it will get the point across. And let me do my check all that apply overall up here. Let me put my check all that apply, and let me do entire view here, entire view here. And what I want to do is when I click something here, it's going to highlight it down here. Let me do a couple of things to make this thing look less sucky. One is, let me get rid of the header, unpivot and pivot, the header being at the bottom of the chart. Let me turn mark labels on, but I'm only going to do it when I highlight them. So when I highlight something, I'll see what the item is. And I'll do the same thing here. I don't need to show the header. And this is check all that apply. Break this down by generation. All right. I want to make it dashboard action. And I want to make it when I highlight something in the top chart, it's going to, when I select something in the top chart, it's going to highlight where it is in the secondary chart. So I want to make it that when I select something in the top chart, it's doing it in the second chart. Sorry that I called that check all that apply overall. And specifically, I want to highlight by the field called wording. Okay, and now I select breathing, and I can see where it is. Pulse rate, I can see where it is. Metabolism, see where it is. And great way to show rank and magnitude at the same time. I will show you one more thing with this. I'll show you the thing that I'm not going to have time to do, and then we're going to have a drawing for the book, and then answer some questions. I can't give somebody this chart, this dashboard. One is I need to have some instructions here, something like, yo, a bar. But this second chart down at the bottom only makes sense if something is selected up at the top. So I'm going to create a new field. I'm going to call the field bogus. It is so bogus, it even has the text value of bogus in it. I'm going to put bogus on detail. So Tableau thinks it's in play. It's not sitting on the bench. In fact, as I highlight this and look at the default tooltip, Tableau thinks there's something bogus going on. Okay. I'm going to go to Dashboard Actions. I'm going to create a second action, a filter action. And when I click in the top chart, I want to filter the second chart. Filter by bogus. And I want to add a filter here and say, now it's not going to actually get rid of any records. It's going to say, you're going to try to filter by bogus as opposed to filtering by gender. Well, it says, all right, I did what you said. You're still going to have exactly the same numbers. Well, what's the point if clicking on that first thing actually doesn't change any of the numbers in the secondary chart? It's this thing right here, exclude all values. When I unselect, I don't want this second chart to show at all. So let's give that a try. Let's see if it works. I select something here, it highlights it, I unselect it, the second chart goes away. And now there isn't this confusion of what you're supposed to do. This is the simple version of it, and for your delight and download and pleasure, Anne and Michael, I will make all these things available. Here is the fancier version of it, including this chart, an additional chart that's over here. The thing that I left off the table, because I don't want to go over time on this, is one of my favorite techniques is jittering. And I've actually just discovered a new technique as well, which I'm going to share in a week or two. But question for you. Let's say you had like this benchmarking survey, and it would allow you as an individual to see your salary versus the average of everybody else. So you just type in your ID and you see, hey, there's me and there's everybody else. And are you pissed off? Are you mildly miffed, seeing that you're making a little more than 80,000, but hey, the average? Or do you look at this and go, oh, okay, that seems okay to me. Now I'm going to show you exactly the same data, but I'm going to show, instead of comparing your dot with aggregated data, I'm going to show you your dot with something like 2,300 other dots. This is exactly the same thing, okay? But now here's you making $80,000, and over here I'm like, all right, I'm a little, feel maybe I'm underpaid, and here I'm going, wait a second, I'm in the lower quartile? I'm great at what I do. How could this be possible? So I'm a big fan of, when you can, and for benchmarking, allowing an individual to see, here's me and here's everybody else. Here's my place and stuff. It gets people pretty interested in your dashboards. I've got a lot of blog posts on it. I just don't have time to walk you through the example right now. All right, Anne and Michael, do we want to do the Q&A first or the drawing for the book?
Q&A? Okay.
Yeah, so my apologies, I kind of gave you a pretty, drink from a fire hose dose of Tableau Prep, and we did visualize one check all that apply question, but that showing rank and magnitude technique, I've got a blog post on how to build it. That works great, and I showed you it works for sales data or any type of measure type of data. Okay, so resources, okay? datarevelations.com. Pretty much all this stuff that is on visualizing survey data is readily available in a whole series of blog posts that I've written going back for a long time. Also, I give workshops around the big book of dashboards, and I'll be talking about that in a minute. Well, I'll send you these links. A bunch of the dashboards are available at bigbookofdashboards.com. And speaking of the workshops, there's the book, which you've seen in person, but I will be coming to Phoenix on November 8th to do a full-day workshop around the book. The price for the full-day workshop is normally $695. There's early bird pricing of $595, and if you use that promo code available to members of the Phoenix Tableau user group, you get 10% discount. So if you sign up now, it's like 500 something versus 695. And I'm very much looking forward to coming out there in November, and hope to see some of you there. And Anne and Michael and others, thank you so much for having me today.
Let's give Steve another round of applause.
Yep.
Thank you, Steve. Have a good night.
Okay, thank you.